Welcome, everyone. We're glad that you are able to join us today. My name is Heather George. Today, Byron Biggie and Tim McManus will be covering Excel add-in reporting. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, your lines are muted. Please use the Q&A for any questions that you have, and we will do our best to address as many as we can. Second, we will be recording this session and it will be made available in our Learning Center on our website after the presentation. Lastly, if you have any questions that arise after the presentation or the presentation itself inspires any ideas of topics that you'd like us to cover in the future, please send an email to info@aitbusiness.com. That email will come to me and I will personally ensure that all inquiries are routed to the appropriate member of our team to assist you. If you are working with another Infor partner, we will be sure to loop them in as well so that they can best support you. And with that, I'd like to welcome Byron and Tim to begin the presentation. Byron, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you get going.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. See if I can find my screen share here. And we will get going. So thanks for taking time out today to join us. We know your time is valuable. You've got lots of requirements to manage, and especially as we go into year end, and especially this year end, you've probably got a lot of new things to manage, so we appreciate it. We're going to be touching today on the Excel add-in that's available for SyteLine for your financial reporting. So our goal today is to provide an overview of the tool, to walk you through its core capabilities, and then we're going to touch also on some of what I think of as the keys to learning the tool and to really unlocking it and putting it to work for you. So we'll touch on some of those recommendations. And we're going to answer, hopefully, some of the typical questions that we get, like what kind of reports can I build with this? Does this just take the standard financials out of SyteLine and export them to Excel? Isn't it the same thing? No, it's actually quite a bit more. So we'll kind of introduce that to you as well. How do I get departmental or product code detail in my reports? Maybe you've used the tool for a while and you're looking to get a bit more detail. So we'll touch on some examples of that, and it might help you along the way and show you, some examples that you can use as a springboard for your own reporting needs. We'll show you how to get started. There's some great tools that come standard with the package that can help you get up and running very quickly. And like I said,
Byron,
I'll show you
I'm going to hop in and interrupt real quick. One of the questions that I get asked a lot also is, like, what does this cost and how do I get it and all that? And I think Byron's going to talk a little bit about where to get it later, but just in terms of cost, this is not an extra charged module or anything. If you're on SyteLine 8 and up, it's available as part of your license.
Cool. Yeah, good point. Yeah, this will work with on-premise or cloud-based systems. So, and we'll touch on where you kind of set that up. But anyway, we'll try to show you some examples as we go along, and of course leave some room at the end for Q&A. If you have something that you've been chasing or just want to ask a question, we'll be happy to try to answer that. So just as we start off, I thought we'd contrast this with what we'll affectionately call the old way, or the more traditional report writer approach. If you've used other systems, kind of the typical approach is you have a tool that you go into to define the columns that you want in your financial report. If you want, say, for example, period column, a year to date, maybe some percentages. You would define those columns very, very distinctly. Likewise, the rows in the report and levels of summation, right, at different levels in the report. Of course, the target data that you want, maybe an account range, department ranges, that kind of thing. So you'd specify the selection criteria. And then, of course, our favorite, right, the formatting, right, getting the spacing right, the underlines right. Do I want, one more space here and then an underline or a double underline? So kind of that back and forth, getting the formatting just right for presentation. So, and just as a point of reference, using our favorite controller homepage, down in the lower left section of the controller homepage is just the shortcuts to where you would typically do that in SyteLine, right under the traditional way. That financial statement definition is where you define that. So as we go forward, we are going to go in there just briefly to touch on that and give you some context that I think will be helpful when we get to the Excel tool. So we'll touch on it briefly, but that's what we kind of refer to as the traditional way, right? And then this new way is more than just spitting that out into Excel, right? So what we want to do is really give you new capabilities and flexibility that you haven't had before in writing your financial statements, and do it in a way that you can leverage a familiar tool, Excel in this case, that you're quite likely in, most of the day. Some people, are in that still more than in SyteLine. So a very familiar environment. And so the idea is to see, well, how could we serve up this data to you in a way that you could use it in a familiar tool. So doing that requires a bit of a different approach, a new mindset, as I call it, right, as you look at writing these financial statements and constructing them. You may be used to the more traditional way. This way is going to be slightly different, but I think once you get the basics of it, it'll click really fast. But it could be a bit different on the surface, and this is really different also as compared to other topics on SyteLine that you may study, where you're just exclusively in the SyteLine application, right? You're navigating through different forms and such. This is going to be a bit different in that it connects different pieces together. So it's really taking your core, call it back-end SyteLine data, right, straight from your GL, and combining it in Excel, which is then going to kind of dovetail into your comfort level and skills in Excel, right? So that's going to come into play. That's going to be combined, of course, with your reporting requirements. What format statements do I need? What level of comparison? What level of detail? Those kind of things. And then last but not least, and really most important, is really your creativity and being inquisitive about it. And I'll show you this a little bit when we get into the tool, but it's really meant to provide a base and a foundation for you to use to build upon and to explore. Okay, so being creative and experimenting with stuff on the accounting side, right? We're not typically known as the most creative people, but in this case, it's good to be creative, try different things, try different formats, and we're going to walk you through some scenarios that will hopefully help you with that. Okay. Recommendations are some of the, I call it keys that I would recommend that could really help you along the path of this journey. On the Excel side of things, Reviewing really basics like things like absolute versus relative cell references. Okay, so this is fairly typical, especially if you're used to doing VLOOKUPs and other more intricate functions, but subtle things like using the dollar sign to anchor a cell reference or a portion of that is really probably the number one most important thing in getting a handle on this tool, right? So these little things are pretty subtle, and if it's second nature to you, great, you're way ahead. But if it's not, it might be worth just a few minutes to kind of review and practice that, because that will certainly be key as we go forward. Some simple things too, like replace values. If you're looking likewise to replace an absolute cell reference, right? A dollar sign for a non-dollar sign or whatever the particular syntax may be. Replace values is surprisingly helpful there. Concatenating values, again, kind of an old tried and true function, but as you look at these reports and you're trying to figure out how do I get different descriptions, maybe I want a combination or a concatenation of these description values to be together. So it provides more insight on my report, then you're going to want to look at concatenating those values. Data validation, right? Establishing a list of allowed values in a certain cell or range, that can be very helpful. We'll show you some examples of that. And conditional formulas, right? Doing the if this, then true or false. And as you may know, you likely know, you can do multiple levels of that. So we're not going to go real deep down that rabbit hole. But again, this is going to be kind of the intersection, if you will, of your data coming up out of the, think of it like the back end of the general ledger, and being available now for you to use it in conjunction with a lot of these tried and true Excel skills that you likely work with already. Outlining is another one. If you want to retain detail in a report but not necessarily show it initially, you can use the outlining feature in Excel. That works very well also. Okay, on the SyteLine side, on the system side, recommend reviewing the sample reports that are available. We're going to go through those. There's a couple tools that come installed with the Excel add-in. One is this tool they call the GL function helper, and it's really kind of a think of it like a tutorial, if you will, that you can use to run different functions against the system and see and just kind of observe and study the syntax that comes out of it. It can prove helpful down the road. And then in addition to that, there's also the report wizard, which gives you ready to use, out of the box, formatted base reports to start with. And we'll take a look at some of these guys as well. And it really is meant to represent a foundation and a base to begin building upon. So we'll try to show you some examples of those. And of course, our favorite, the documentation. The documentation on this one is actually very helpful. There's a lot of syntax examples that prove very helpful in there. So if you don't have that already, you should have access to it, I think, on Extreme or Concierge, or we can assist you in getting a copy of that too. But it's very helpful in giving examples. So, and just to highlight a couple, this is an excerpt out of one of the functions, and you can see here, like in this little section, they give you really kind of a step-by-step breakdown example of, if you enter these values, this would be the outcome. So we'll touch on that a little bit in a few moments, a little bit more as well, but I just wanted to mention it here as a point of reference that the documentation is actually very good on this one.
Yeah.
Okay?
Hey, Byron, this is available on the support site you were saying, and it actually comes in the, like there's a whole zip file that has the executable, the plugin, the add-in, and the documentation all in one little thing. It's like, I don't know, a 10-minute setup. It's pretty quick.
Right. In there, they make reference to optional arguments, which is kind of interesting. That's another key to keep in the back of your mind as you read through this, and I'll show you an example of that towards the end. But optional arguments are kind of helpful to understand. And from a performance standpoint, they really recommend turning off the auto recalc, right? So if you have a workbook built that's fairly intricate and you've got multiple worksheets in that workbook, right? Every time you touch something, it's going to want to recalc. So that as it grows and as it gets bigger, they recommend turning that off and just distinctly refreshing it when you need it. Okay, so for those of you that are more experienced with the tool, that might be something to try as well. So, okay, so that really kind of concludes the slide portion of the presentation, and what I thought we'd do is really dive in and get into the system and try to explore and check it out. So no further ado, let's end that one, and we're going to go over here to the SyteLine. Tim, are you seeing my screen? Am I showing the right one?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, so just as a point of reference and to give us some context, I thought we'd touch briefly on call it the traditional way. And I'm just in the controller homepage using this just as a navigation method, but I'm going to go to financial statement definition, and these are my my statements that are set up. So far, we're going to kind of focus mostly on an income statement, just by example. And these are the two ways in which I traditionally define the report, right? Like we discussed, the columns and the lines. I look at the columns here. I can see that so far I've got, looks like 4 columns, right? I've got a period to date, a year to date column, and a period to date budget, and a year to date budget. If I wanted to compute the difference, I could add another column, right, and make it a calculated column. Then I would tell it the target, right, this column from that column, and really define the parameters, right, for that column. Pretty straightforward. That's, I think, been around for quite a while. So we're going to be able to do that same kind of stuff in the Excel tool. So just keep that in mind. We'll jump back here and go to the lines just as a reference. So likewise on the line side, right, you can see the traditional way of defining the report. I want a blank line at the top. I want some header information here. I want a title for sales. And I come down here, this line number 8 has accounts. And so this is where, for example, I could tell, okay, on this line, I want to pull these accounts. Looks like I have a range defined here. I don't have any unit codes defined, which is okay. Those are optional, but that's where I could likewise, right? I could add optional unit code, parameters to that as well. And so I just wanted to introduce this maybe just kind of as a visual reference to keep in the back of your mind, right? Because as we get into the Excel tool, these distinct pieces, right, what's presented very distinctly on this form here to choose from will be likewise available on the Excel side. It's just going to take the form of an Excel function, right? So these different pieces and all this same capability we're going to show you how you can do on the Excel side, but it's just going to be within a function. Okay, so hopefully that helps just from a context standpoint where we're headed. So we're going to jump into Excel, and let's just go into
while you
the
do that,
Blackboard.
I'll just
Workbook.
probably point out there's probably more than a couple people on this call that are not going to be disappointed that they don't have to work in that tool set anymore. That tool set was there 25 years ago, and it's a brand new day here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So which is really where this was, I guess, fundamentally born out of, right? How can you serve up my data to me into Excel so that I can use the ease and the formatting, and the familiarity that I have with Excel. So when the tool's installed, it'll install this new option here at the top with its own new ribbon set of options. I'm not going to go too far into the setup of all of this. It'll connect to on-premise or cloud-based, data as well. But really, we're going to just focus on a couple examples, and I just want you to see the sample reports. So we're going to open this tool, the report wizard that I mentioned before, and in it there are some base reports to get you started right away. We don't presume to know every format that you may want, but these are some basic ones to get you started and to really, I would say more importantly, serve as a foundation and as a guide for you to modify and to customize as you see fit, very quick and easily once you understand the syntax and the argument. So let's just take a look at one real quick. Profit and loss. We're going to look at that one. I've got some data back here in 16 because this is the sandbox that I'm in. I'm going to just click all these options for dynamic parameters.
I think you went to
balance.
2015, Byron.
Thank you. Okay, and we're gonna go and we're gonna see what it brings up. So it's gonna run I'll close that. So it ran for me a basic P&L statement. Looks like it brought in my logo here and tried to center it there, but brought in a basic P&L statement using the criteria that I gave it. Right, this is the site that I'm in and the period and the year, and pulled that data straight in from the general ledger. So what I want to do is just kind of park here for a couple minutes and take a look and study what it did, and so you get an understanding, because that's really key. I don't see any data here in this period column, so I wonder if I have data back in a different period. So if I go back to, let's go back to January. Oh, there we go. So you can see when we told it to use dynamic references, it set up the functions, and we'll look at this more in a minute, but it set them up in a way that's using the cell reference dynamically, such that whenever I change this, it's gonna dynamically change the report, right, accordingly. So I could change really anything if I needed to flip to a different site, if I needed to flip to a different year, right? I could do that. Do I have anything in the prior year for period 3, right? So very fast, very dynamic, and it's your back end, core GL data coming right out of your general ledger, and it does that via a series of basically specialized functions. So if you're familiar with VLOOKUPs, for example, this is going to be very familiar kind of territory for you. But so it's going to use these functions combined with a series of arguments to the function, and each of those is going to be basically one of these pieces. So hey, go to the general ledger, pull back the period change, where the account equals this, the period equals that, the year equals this, etc. Okay, so that's really the essence of what it's doing. So if we went to this, in this case, this period value here, and just hit F2 just so we can kind of see the contributing pieces here, right? You can see what pieces it's referencing there, right? So what it did back, click back over here, right? So what it did back over here, call it distinctly, right, defined in a form like this, it's simply doing here by you telling it the cell reference or the value that you want it to reference for that argument. And that's basically it. So this is your period value. This one is year to date. So it's likewise, it's calling a different function. So it goes to the general ledger and is going to pull the then accumulated year to date balance through the period or period year site, etc. that you define here. Okay. So so I would say this statement's really meant to do two things. Number one, it gets you out of the gate quick. It gets you up and running. It gets you a very reasonable, usable report that you can use as a point of reference. Right. So this is always available to you. It's somewhat formatted with subtotals, etc. But very quick and easy out of the gate, fast. And the second thing it does really is to serve as a foundation for you to build your own. So if you said something like, well, the system provides that basic P&L, but I really need, I need a monthly P&L, like 12 months or 13 month, rolling P&L or side-by-side months. How would I do that? Once you kind of understand the premise and the mechanics of the syntax, you could very easily just come in to the tool like this and say, I'm gonna kind of experiment with this a little bit and just make some room for myself. So if Byron's telling me this is really these columns here, right? So if it's really these guys here, and I just moved them over there, but then I said, well, take all of this and just copy it, right? If I copied this like this, and I said, I want this to be period 1, this to be period 2, period 3, period 4, could I start building out a monthly comparative? I'm not going to do them all, but you get the idea. But wait a minute, my period 2, 3, 4 didn't work. Hey, what's going on? Something broke. And so this is where it's important to check your cell references or that absolute value, right? So if you go to F2 here, we can see call it arguments that it's hitting, right? So it goes and looks at the GL account and the rest of them. What happened when I moved over here? Oh, I lost the account. So if I move that back, I want that back over there. But look, likewise, these these stayed anchored or absolute, reference on these, which I really don't want. So I don't want that one to be absolute. I want it to be G. So I want to show you this. So if you take this first, couple of minutes here when you start building on this, if you take, all right, see that? So I fixed the reference, and I also need to fix this column C because I don't want it moving anymore, right? So I want that locked on that column. Okay, that's working now. So now that I've fixed it, I can very quickly, and I'm only doing 4 columns in this example, but 12 columns, however many you want, and however many years as well. So if you said, well, that's kind of interesting, but what if I want to see what happened maybe January in the prior year? So I want right, same month, year over year. I could change that, or I could do 14, 15, 16, whatever, year by year. So really the selection becomes secondary to the structure. Once you have it set up, and once it kind of clicks, then you realize, gosh, if Byron's shown me that, then I could probably do, I could do year over year, month over month, side by side, really anything that you want. Okay, so that's one small example.
Hey, Byron, I got a question. That $606,000 there. Can I see what that is made up of?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so once you've built that, the other strength of the tool and the beauty of it is beyond giving you just the reporting, right, or just producing the numbers, it'll actually provide details. So like in this case on the sales number, on any of these, but we'll use this one, I could right-click this number and either click up here on the toolbar. I could have clicked drill down, or I can right here I can click drill down and say, hey, what makes up this number? Show me this in a new spreadsheet. And what it did is it just went to your detailed general ledger and pulled back all the detail of that sales account, right, for that time period. So right away you can see, okay, these are accounts receivable invoices. I can see here's a customer reference, and I can see each one. And then if Tim called me and said, hey, this one right here, at 28,000, whatever, I'm kind of curious, can you tell me what was on that? In this column here, these values that are underlined indicate that also is eligible for a drill down. So I could likewise click on the invoice and say, well, show me the details of that invoice as well. And it'll likewise drill back to the line item detail. So you can see that's the invoice number already. We knew that. The date, the customer, there's the customer's PO. These are the line numbers on the customer order, the items that they bought, the quantity, the unit price, and the extended price. Pretty cool. All without leaving Excel, all without having to go chase down those additional levels of detail. And as I did that, each level of detail opened in this same workbook in a new page. So,
by the way, if anyone's got any questions or comments or anything, the Q&A is open, and I'll be monitoring it. So feel free to ask anything.
Yeah, and so this is one of those significant like additional features, right, to the Excel add-in over and above the traditional way, right, is to be able to go from from a report like this, a seemingly summary report, and dig down into the details is pretty dramatic, right? To be able to drill down. Now, I could ask it also, hey, show me these details, but take me back into SyteLine and open up a form and show me. But to be able to get that level of detail quickly is huge. Okay, so that's really an example of the mechanics. So let's go on. I want to just look at a couple other examples in the report wizard. We know we have a balance sheet in here. Well, let's look at what kind of balance sheet they give us. And I suppose it doesn't really matter initially what year period. If I just said make it dynamic and give me everything, it's going to do its thing and present me with a starting base balance sheet. It seems to like to center my logo here, but so it gives me this balance sheet, and likewise gets you up and running out of the gate very quickly. If you wanted to, you could come in here and just maybe insert some rows. If you wanted to subtotal something, right now you have the benefit of subtotaling and underlining and bolding and all of those fun bells and whistles right on the Excel side of things. Likewise, it looks like you have these same parameters up here, so it's dynamic in that I can change any of these. That's pretty cool. We saw that before, so I know that that's working. If I come down and kind of study, well, how did they build this here? This is interesting. This cell here looks like it's some kind of a condition looking at G, which is hidden. So kind of interesting. Let's see what they did here. So I'm going to unhide G here so I can see here. So if I go to this guy, what did they do here? Oh, I see. So they're calling a specific function, right, to pull a GL balance, and it likewise has a series of arguments, which if I looked at it, not surprisingly, same kind of thing. That's interesting. Okay, but then, so that's pulling back the value, and then they just basically did something over here to, call it place that value from a debit or credit position standpoint, from a presentation standpoint, just to place it, right, left or right. So that's kind of interesting. But likewise, if I said, well, I don't really need the debit or credit position thing at the moment. I know I need this, right? I'm going to open up this, and I'm going to just, right, I need a monthly. I'm going to copy this down. Same kind of thing like we did on the P&L side. I can very quickly create, in a matter of minutes, you name it, year over year, monthly, month over month, right? Using that same approach that you saw me do on the P&L side. The mechanics of it are exactly the same, right? As far as the absolute cell references, that's really the key. Just make sure it's pointed and mapped to the right place, and you're up and running. Okay. So that's a quick look at the base balance sheet, and I hope you're getting a sense of maybe where, like I was referring earlier, where I was saying it's a bit different, right? It's a little bit different approach. It's okay to be inquisitive and kind of exploring this stuff and saying, well, what would happen if I took that same approach and I did it for last year or last period, etc. That's really what it's meant for. Okay, let's look at one more in here as an approach. Here's a trial balance. It wants to know what equity account we want. I'm just going to say make it dynamic. So it's gonna run a quick trial balance and dump it out. Right, pretty pretty similar approach, not surprisingly. It looks like they're doing something with a hidden column, right? I could do something similar like that. I could kind of retain that if I like that. Nothing wrong with it, but that is, a good example of how you could do that. Anyway, this is your trial balance, right? All the way through, down through your P&L accounts, right? All the way down to the end. So again, that gets you up and running very quickly out of the gate. Okay. Another thing I wanted to mention is this other tool, this GL Helper. It's likewise another kind of tutorial or tool that you can use as a point of reference. It does. Well, there's pros and cons to it. Let me show you. So let's run a P&L out of this one just to show you where we're going here. And so it's asking me, do I want to use a cell reference? I do, because I don't want it actually hard coding the account number. I want it to use the cell reference that the account number is in. Likewise, this I want to be dynamic. And then it's going to pull the account code. That's pretty familiar. We saw that before. And its description. And its balance, which would be the actual, a period budget, and a period plan. That's interesting. So we know we have those two buckets available to us in the system, budget and plan. Let's pull the year-to-date stuff here as well, just so we have it, actual, budget, and plan. So just take a look at this before we click generate. I just want you to remember. So this is going to be basically, the period side, actual, budget, and plan, and a year-to-date, actual, budget, and plan. All right, so we haven't seen anything pull budget and plan yet, but this one is going to pull that, and it's going to basically serve it up to us. Click generate in a pretty basic kind of no frills flat file format here. So just to give this a little formatting, easier to look at. So we know that we said this was actual, and you can see in our formula there's an A in that one. All right, this one has a B, not surprisingly, for budget, and a P for plan. And we knew that was. Let's just insert a couple rows here. Give ourselves a minute. So I knew that one was actual. This one was budget, and this one was plan. This is going to be the same thing over here. Actual, budget, plan. Right. Just so you get the idea. And we know that this was the period to date side, those three, and this was the, call it, year to date side. So very quickly I can, right, so I could come up with all the structure of it, and then I can just add my own formatting. But very quickly, if I needed something actual budget, I could run this, spit it out like this, and say, okay, I don't need the plan piece of it, maybe in this case. Oh, it doesn't want to do that because I merged that. But, right, so you get the idea. I could just, right, kill out that piece, right? I want it to just be actual versus budget, right? And I'm up and running. So I can apply my formatting as I see fit, right? Just just put in my breaks here wherever I want them to be. Add my subtotals, and off I go. So again, kind of a springboard or a foundational tool for you to use to begin building very quickly, putting together your own formats. So that one's available to you as well. That one, it does a few additional things like the budget and plan, so that's helpful, but it's not quite as formatted. Or you have this a bit more formatted approach here, right? And then you can likewise change the syntax. So, but again, 2 foundational tools available to you, get you out of the gate quick, and give you a good foundation to build upon. And by way of example, I told you I'd show you just a couple examples. So just food for thought, and again, we're just exploring and kind of planting seeds here. But this is an example of of really a reporting package that we began to put together as a sample. That's the idea is like kind of like a tangible reporting package you might hand to the owner or the CFO that has a cover, et cetera. Likewise, you can create a series of these reports, put them in a workbook in a structure that kind of mirrors something physical. So here's a cover, and all we're doing is basically defining those parameters up front, and everything is linked to that. Here's a quick look at a month and year to date. Really nothing special. You saw us do really the core of this already. In this one, I added a little thing to do some outlining and say, well, I want to show them not just the total, but I want to be able to show them the details. So I pulled in the detail, yet I outlined it or rolled it up by product code. So I want to say, not only here's sales, but when and if that question comes, I want to be able to answer it quickly, or better yet, just have them, click the detail and unroll it. The mechanics of that are not, in concept, they're not terribly different. You can see here that it has some additional pieces or additional arguments, and I'll show you an example here in a moment. But the mechanics of it is simply adding the additional arguments to the function. In this case, it's at the product code level. I could have done this at a department level and or any combination thereof, but you're going to add those additional arguments to it and to get additional levels of detail. So that's a quick look at doing something with outlining, and maybe just an idea on how you could make it more, call it presentation ready. This one, I think I also did something for budget. So if for whatever reason I wanted to flip it and just see the budget or the plan, right, I could do that real quick. Maybe you want to see it side by side, budget and plan. Again, we know we can do that pretty easily. Here's another one, monthly side by side. So basically just put the month number on top of each one and change the reference. Right? These are by product code, but change the reference to be each month. Here's a look at one. Sample format by department. This is for a single month, and it's got departments listed across the top.
And for clarity, Byron, that's typically unit code 1, and that I'm sure in the bike database it is, right? So you're taking this and kind of dividing it up by those unit codes.
Exactly, and so down here, like. I don't have a lot of detail in here by department, but just for example, if I unroll this, you can see what I'm doing in this function here is really, right? So it's got additional arguments here for, and I'll show you an example of this in a moment, but a better example. Additional arguments here. They're simply calling the different unit codes. And for that unit code 1 piece, I simply have it up here, I think at the top, right? I just put like up here each department's unit code. so that I didn't have to hard code it down the left side. And I just said, really it's all based on unit code 1. So 2, 3, and 4 can be an asterisk. But so really what I'm doing is saying all the same things we looked at before, pull that account, period, year, etc. But in this case, add the additional, what are really optional arguments. But I want to use those optional arguments, the additional piece, and I want to use the department for unit code 1. Okay.
Byron, real quick, we did have a few questions come in that I answered most of those in typing, but I'd like to just kind of go over them real quick, take a second. A question about whether it works on older versions of SyteLine like SL8 or only CSI. So it does work on SyteLine 8.0 is like the first 8, I believe. I don't know if anyone's running it in 7, but yeah, because it SyteLine 8 and further because it's using the IDO connection. Question, does this work on cloud version or on premise? Either, absolutely. Because you're just going to change where you point to it, the server name that it's looking for. Let's see, do end users, this kind of together, end users need, actually this one is separate. Do the end users need to know how to connect to the database? Somebody will to set this up initially. The instructions are pretty clear about how to actually kind of set up the tool. What you need is, for instance, where the server that's running the IDO request service, maybe some, you might want it done by security. As you can see, you can set up, you can actually give people all the sites if you're in multi-site or individual sites, and that you can, load up in here and restrict. And then these two questions are kind of the same. Is there any additional security to access financial statements from Excel? And does this use a license to run? It's kind of yes and yes. There's, with the SyteLine transaction licenses, so like you get a 50 user thing, you usually get that many licenses of the Office integration, and you'll want to assign that to the user. And that is one way that you can keep people out of there as well. One quick thing, if you see what Byron's got up there, the thing Byron just closed.
Okay.
He's looking there up at the top. There's a left button, right button, direct connection. We actually had the ability back in the day to connect directly to the database with user, a SQL level user connection. And then the other is the IDO web service, which is basically just, connecting like you're firing up a SyteLine license. The direct connection would not be available in the cloud version.
In the cloud.
You can't get to the SQL database. And frankly, I have not come up with a good reason to use the direct connection. There's, that whole drill down and where's this number coming from, and open up a form from the Excel. That's only available if you have your web server. And then one last question, actually two now. Could we do all this manipulation within the parameter setup so when we download the financial reports, it's already a finished report? Absolutely. And that's the beauty of this, is that you can kind of set up your year over year and do all that sort of stuff and just open it up and run it. I have to share this. There was a company we had that they've been on this application since like 2000, right? And so they were in the progress version, and then they used all the, all of the financial reporting, and we upgraded them to 8 and put this in, and this is a real life quote. Just had to take a break and let you know I love this add-in. Now there's current information out there recreating the trial balance I do in corporates format, which normally takes me hours of pasting, copying, data entry, balancing. Now I go to the Excel and it's done in 5 minutes. Magic. So
Mhm.
I love reading that. So yeah.
Yeah, another great use for it could be departmental level reporting, right? Maybe you have, 5 or 6 department heads that you need to provide a monthly reporting package to. So in this case, we're looking at kind of the full P&L, but for them, right, you might maybe something by department, right? So you could take something like this, pare it down, strip out just to only what's their department, and have it pull in, right, subject to that department, a range of accounts, et cetera, that are important, and and be able to automate it and provide it, very quickly at the end of the month. So departmental level, product code, maybe something at a product line level that you want to do as well. So it doesn't have to be obviously full P&L. So just keep that in mind too. It could be for account analysis kind of thing where they can see the summary, right click, and drill down to the detail themselves.
Nice. Hey, we got 3 minutes left.
Mm-hmm. Let me show you one last thing here, unless there's any more questions, Tim. One parting thing.
There's one that's probably not an easy answer that I will. Yeah, go on, okay. And I'll take this guy.
So again, just some examples here. Actual budget. You can get some ideas of formatting. It's really right wherever your creativity and the requirements lead you. But I just want to leave you with one last thing. So we talked about the documentation. I've got a couple excerpts here just to show you. It's actually pretty good. They give you quite a few examples and examples of what the actual syntax is for the function that you're looking at. It's not always apparent at first glance which of those are really optional, but you can see here. Here's a little example of using the asterisk to pick up other additional unit codes. But I wanted to just leave you with this. So I'll point you to the documentation. Is actually pretty good, but this is a quick example of how to get your unit code detail in there, and I did it just step by step because it's not super apparent at first when you look at. So just thinking kind of process of elimination. This first one here is the syntax for this particular function, and you can see it's got these 2 commas side by side. So something goes in there, but it's optional really. And what that is if you think of it just sequentially, right, building this little puzzle here, is that's really where unit codes would go. And if I was going to put some unit codes in there, they would be kind of positioned like this in quotes. I would have to wrap those in quotes. And the next layer of the syntax is that while I wrap the whole thing in quotes, each of the unit codes themselves likewise have their own little syntax. I would have to wrap it in a ampersand and quotes as well. And then just to show you the last final one, clean up the spacing and whatnot. So that's actually the syntax that it would be looking for. And I only point that out because when you first look through the book and you see something like this one up here, and you're like, well, I didn't see any place to put in unit codes. And you don't at first because it's optional. And as you begin to explore that element of it, this is the type of syntax you'd be looking for. Okay, so just something to keep in mind if you're looking for like where to put the unit code syntax. That's really where it lives. It may be optional in what you're looking at.
Cool.
Okay. So that's all we had. We're happy to help. If you have questions along the journey, if we can help you along, if you're stuck on anything or just have a general question, we're here to help and assist however we can. And with that, I'll turn it back to Tim and Heather.
Awesome, Byron. Thank you to both of you, Byron and Tim, for sharing all this information today. And thank you everyone for attending. If you found value in this session, we welcome you to join us for our ongoing Lunch and Learn series. The next presentation will take place in January and invitations will be sent out soon. All information about our Lunch and Learns can be found in our Learning Center on our website. And if you'd like to receive email invitations for each session, please either sign up in our Learning Center or feel free to shoot me an email at info@aitbusiness.com and I'll get you added to the list. Thank you again for attending and I hope everyone has a great week. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.